So good evening, everyone. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. Welcome to tonight's information session regarding the City of Ottawa's 2024 draft operating and capital budget. This meeting is being hosted by the City Councillors' offices for Ward 23, Councillor Alan Hubley, and Ward 4, Councillor Kathy Curry. Before we begin, we would like to start with the land acknowledgement. Ottawa is built on unceded Anishinaabe Algonquin territory. The peoples of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. La ville d'Ottawa rend hommage au peuple et au territoire de la nation Anishinaabe Algonquine. La ville d'Ottawa rend hommage à toutes les Premières Nations, à tous les Inuits, à tous les Métis, de même qu'aux précieuses contributions passées et présentes à cette terre. Tonight's meeting will proceed as follows. We begin with opening remarks from the ward councillors. Councillor Curry will, however, be a little delayed and instead speak at the conclusion of the meeting. We'll turn to opening remarks from Councillor Hubley. Following the remarks, we will turn to a presentation by city staff. This will be led by Svetlana, Valkova, and Suzanne, Schnob, managers of financial services within the Finance and Corporate Services Department. Following their presentation, we open the floor to in-person and virtual questions. In-person attendees will be asked to pose their questions from the mic at the front of the room, while virtual attendees are asked to use the raise hand icon on Zoom. Once your hand is raised, you'll be prompted to unmute and ask your question. I will also be monitoring the chat for any virtual questions. Without further ado, I will turn it to Councillor Hubley for opening remarks.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. We appreciate this, and we hope you'll appreciate the work that's gone into this draft budget and the lowest possible tax rate that we could achieve and still deliver these services. I'm going to be here for the evening to get your feedback, and I believe Councillor Curry will be joining us after. Just she can't be here for the start. I want to thank the staff for coming out tonight and running this for us and providing the info for you. I'll let you know that I'm dressed like this because I spent my whole day getting ready for the Christmas parade on Saturday. We were putting signs out and handing out flyers, so it's no suit tonight. Anyway, I'll pass the microphone now to staff so we can get going on the presentation. I look forward to what you have to say.
Good evening, everyone. I'll move to the next slide. Good evening, everyone. So I'll start our presentation on the 2024 draft budget. So every year, the City of Ottawa produces a municipal budget. It is one of the most important documents. The budget is a blueprint that defines how resources are collected and allocated. The budget is made up of two components, the operating budget and capital budget. The Ontario Municipal Act provides rules for municipalities to prepare their budgets. By law, municipalities cannot have an operating deficit. The Act requires that only municipalities to balance their budget each year, which means that expenditures must equal revenues, or real simply put, money out must equal the money coming in when building and adopting the overall budget. To balance the budget, the city can either increase its revenues using tools such as property taxes and fees, or through managing expenses through efficiencies and continuous improvements to continue to focus on providing services for value for money. Next slide, please. Beginning with the operating budget, we're getting to some definitions here. It covers the ongoing day-to-day expenses that the municipality incurs to provide programs and services to residents, including items such as staff salaries, emergency services such as fire, paramedics, and bylaw, recreation programs, facility maintenance, winter operations, and utilities, to list a few. Compared to personal budgeting, this is the equivalent to buying groceries, clothing, paying for hydro, water bills, and paying for insurance as comparable examples. Moving along to the capital budget, these are plans for the acquisition and replacement of tangible capital assets, which are defined as significant expenditures to provide municipal services with a benefit beyond 1 year. The capital budget excludes the cost of operating these services, which form part of the operating budget. The capital budget is developed in accordance with council-approved official plan, transportation master plan, infrastructure master plan, development charge background study, and the various long-range financial plans. It covers long-term investments such as road paving and resurfacing, sidewalks, new investments in facilities and investments to maintain existing facilities, bridges, parks, infrastructure, water treatment plants, pumping stations, water, wastewater, and storm infrastructure, such as underground pipes, and traffic control devices and pedestrian crossovers, to list a few examples. Compared to, again, to personal budgeting, this is the equivalent to buying a new car, replacing your furnace, or building an addition on a home, or replacing your roof as comparable examples. Next slide, please. Now we're going to cover the funding sources for both the operating and capital budgets. So beginning with operating budget, their funding sources include annual property taxes, user fees and charges, assessment growth related revenues, provincial and federal funding, payment in lieu of taxes, which is related to federal government buildings, investment income and dividends. And similarly, but a little bit different, capital budget funding sources also include property taxes, development charges, federal and provincial funding, debt, and water utility rate supported infrastructure fees. Next slide, please. Excuse me. So the city has four main major budget categories or groupings. The first three on this slide, which are tax supported, transit, and police, are each funded through their own separate tax with their own tax levy. The fourth, which is rate supported, is funded through water utility charges. And I'll explain each of these in a bit more detail in the following slides. Next slide, please. The majority of the city's programs and services are funded by annual property taxes. These programs and services are referred to as tax supported services and are funded by the citywide tax levy on the property tax bill. Property taxes are the largest single source of revenue for the city. It represents around just under 50% of the total annual revenue. Examples of tax supported programs and services include roads and winter maintenance, parks, recreation, and facility services and programs, libraries, public health, paramedics, community and social services, fire services, and the Office of the Auditor General. It's also important to note that some tax-supported programs receive provincial funding. For example, public health is provincially funded by, so it's funded 75% by the province and 25% by the city. Paramedics have a 50-50 split between funding from the province and the city. And then community and social services have a variety of different funding percentages from the province. Next slide, please. Moving along to the transit services budget. The transit services are funded through a separate tax on the property tax bill, and that's the transit levy. The transit levy is its own separate tax stream. The city's fiscal framework recommends that transit fares recover 55% of expenditures, and remaining is the remaining 45% is covered by the transit tax levy. Transit services receives federal and provincial funding through the provincial and federal gas tax. The city's transit services fall under the authority of the Transit Commission and includes services provided by OC Transpo, Paratranspo, and the city's LRT. The police services budget is funded through its separate tax on the property tax bill, which is the police levy. The police levy is its own tax stream, it's a separate tax stream similar to the transit on the property tax bill. And then the police services falls under the authority of the Police Services Board. Next slide, please. Moving along to the rate support budget, the city's water, wastewater, and stormwater services are funded through a separate user fee called charge to residents on their bi-monthly water utility bill, or as a fee on their property tax bill. These programs and services are referred to as rate-supported services, and some examples of these are drinking water purification, delivery of clean water to residents and businesses, collection and treatment of wastewater, stormwater management, water meter installation, and life cycle updates. The budget for the city's rate-supported services falls under the authority of the Environment and Climate Change Committee and is directed by the council-approved rate long-range financial plan. Next slide. The Municipal Act allows municipalities to impose fees and charges to cover the cost of delivering services in their jurisdiction. Revenues from the fees are used to offset the cost of providing the good or service. The Municipal Act prescribes the various areas that fees and charges can be imposed. Examples of user fees and charges include transit fares, recreation program fees, facility and arena rentals, building permit fees, parking permit fees, and water utility fees. And I'll now pass it over to Svetlana.
Thank you, Suzanne. The draft 2024 operating budget totals 4.6 billion for tax and rate supported services. Next slide, please. As seen on the slide, each service grouping listed is showing the budgeted net expenditure requirement and its proportion of the total budget. Community and Social Services has a draft budget of 975.8 million, representing 21% of the total budget. About 72% of the total of that budget is funded by revenues, primarily from provincial and federal agreements. The services delivered from this group has the highest ratio of government funding in the organization for areas such as employment and social services, children's services, housing services, and long-term care. Transit services has a draft budget of 731.2 million, which is just under 16% of the total budget. Its revenues fund about 44% of its expenses, but unlike community and social services, there are no budgeted revenues from the provincial and federal government. Moving along to the far right of the slide, water, wastewater, stormwater, and solid waste services present a draft budget of 616.3 million. These expenses are fully funded from its own revenues. Next slide, please. As previously mentioned, Ontario municipal budgets are legislated to be balanced, meaning that its expenditures must match its revenues. Unlike provincial and federal budgets, the City of Ottawa cannot budget for deficit. Therefore, total revenues for the city are also budgeted at 4.6 billion. Nearly half of that is from property taxes, bringing nearly 2.2 billion based on tax increase of no more than 2.5%. (23% of revenues, totaling just over 1 billion, are from fees and service charges, and 20% is funding from other levels of government. There is also payment in lieu of taxes, also referred as PILTs. These are revenues that are related to federal government properties, as they do not receive a traditional property tax bill. The balance of revenues come from reserves and other revenues such as investment income. Next slide, please. The 2024 draft capital budget totals 1.2 billion and is reflected in the 6 groupings on this slide. The capital budget reflects investments in our infrastructure, such as community centers, sidewalks, roads, sewers, libraries, vehicles, and equipment, just to name a few. Next slide, please. On this slide, we're showing the same 1.2 billion capital investment broken out by its funding sources. Our capital budget is primarily funded by our reserves, representing almost 60% of total funding. About 354 million of the capital budget is funded by debt. About 180 million is funded by development charges, and 2.7 million is funded by revenues that are primarily federal and provincial funding. Next slide, please. Another key component of the budget process is public engagement. Opportunities for residents to share feedback are contacting one's ward councillor, online engagement via Engage Ottawa, councillor-led public consultations, and new to this year, this year's process, enhanced social media posts, electronic advertisements at city facilities. Next slide, please. Immediately following the approval of the 2023 budget, we engaged with residents about how they interact with and consume budget information. We also met with each councillor for feedback on the budget and engagement process. The information we collected was invaluable and led us to several enhancements for the 2024 budget. These enhancements were built and incorporated in a short period as we build 2 budgets in a calendar year following the election. These enhancements increase municipal budget literacy, improve the navigation of budget documentation, enhance reporting, and focus on highlighting investments in services and programs that residents rely on and care about the most. The 2024 draft budget also better identifies how programs and services align with the term of council priorities. To begin, we adjusted our consultation timeline with the mayor and elected officials. These meetings were held earlier in the process to provide more opportunity to incorporate feedback. In September, we hosted a Budget 101 technical briefing for media and members of council. We also met with many members of the media one-on-one to answer further questions about the complexities of the municipal budget. We've created a new magazine-style document which provides insight into how we build the budget, the various legislation and policy that provide parameters for our budget, how the city operates, key investments, details on priority initiatives, and perhaps the most consistent request from councillor members was to make connections to the strategic plan. Throughout this document, we've made clear connections between the budget and the strategic plan. We also launched a new online budget tool on ottawa.ca. The draft budget tool visualizes city financial information with interactive charts, graphs, and tables. The open budget tool will help the community gain a deeper understanding of the elements and terminology related to the city's budget. The tool makes key budget details accessible to the public in a more interactive and transparent manner. The open budget tool is part of the open data program where you can find different statistics and information on city services and programs. Next slide, please. Next steps are the committee budget meetings as seen on the slide. And after committee, boards, and commission meetings have occurred, the budget will rise to council for approval on December 6th. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Thanks for your presentation, Svetlana and Suzanne. We'll happily turn to questions now from in-person attendees and virtual attendees. For those who may have logged on after and are attending it virtually, you can use the raise hand function to identify yourself, and I will prompt you to unmute. Any in-person questions will be directed by Pat, who is in the room and can identify them.
This presentation is extremely general. I want to ask a specific question. Housing is a huge issue in Ottawa right now, and I know you're dealing with it in many different ways. I'm just wanting to know how you've managed to put into the budget things which would eventually, in fact, meet the city's goals, which were supposed to be set in the 10-year plan by 2024, and obviously won't be, that everybody on the street would be housed. And I didn't see what is in there. I've read a little bit about it, but there's a lot of people very concerned about that part of the operation of the city.
Thanks for your question. With regards to housing and a 2024 draft budget, there was, I'll say in the 2024 draft budget has seen significant increases to investments in regarding housing, beginning with we previously in previous years, we've typically had a $15 million annual investment towards on the capital side towards affordable towards housing. This is in the 2024 budget has now been increased to just under $24 million. And then and it is expected to get that annual investment up to $25 million. No, sorry, 25. Don't quote me that. It is planning to increase to an increased amount to 2027. So again, we went from $15 million to just under $24 million from the last year's budget to this year's. And then in addition to that, within the 2024 draft budget, within the operating budget, there was an additional $5 million that is dedicated towards transitional housing.
Can you explain the different, what traditional housing means and like what is that at market housing?
Sorry, I meant it's a transitional housing. So it's making sure, I'll say that maybe they get from a, you know, a shorter term housing arrangement to a more permanent one.
So
Great.
you mentioned that most of our income for the city comes from property tax, right? Do we know how affordable housing can actually help raise more revenue for the city in the long term?
I can probably get back to you with more details about that, but I would theoretically speaking, I would just say that, you know, if we were working towards affordable housing, we, you know, have less a strain on the system for, you know, between getting people into finding them homes. So, you know, once we work on getting affordable housing, more units up that are affordable for our residents, you know, as opposed to being in a social program to get assistance to get that permanent housing, I think again it's benefit to the city and will benefit. You know, once we get more full housing on that, you know, we get those property taxes in from those units as well. But if you know, if you'd like more details, I can circle back to you and get those details for you.
So there is one virtual hand that was raised, Lucas Stodola. I'm gonna prompt you to unmute.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, I was just wondering, will this, because it's being recorded, I believe this session, is it gonna be posted on the Councillor Curry or Alan Hubley's website for future viewing for residents that haven't attended at this session?
Yeah, I can answer that for Councillor Curry. Yeah, we'll post it either on the website or on her her YouTube channel. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. There's one chat question I've received from Jeffrey Tong asking about Kanata specific cycling and walking infrastructure and public transit investment. So obviously I know this is a general budget meeting, so maybe you could speak about generally like cycling, walking, and public transit investments as part of the budget, and if you are aware of anything Kanata related.
I'll probably have to get back to you on the Kanata specific details. But with in generally speaking, with regards to active transportation, the 2024 draft budget, if I'm not mistaken, I'll probably have to get the firm numbers on this, but we have $4 million of a standalone investment in active transportation. In terms of infrastructure with cycling and other forms, I'll probably have to go back and provide those details, and I can get that through the councillor's office to provide those details.
Great. So yeah, Jeffrey, you can reach out to either our office or Councillor Hubley's office and we'll help facilitate that. Thank you. Anybody in person who wishes to?
Yes, one. The transit levy, is it flat? Is it the same amount for every property tax payer, or is it progressive?
Sorry, do you mean like, is between the citywide tax levy, the police levy and the
No,
transit?
transit levy.
The transit levy, are you trying to say like, is it always the same that all three would be at the same rate?
No,
No.
the transit levy, is it $50 a house per property, or is it based on your property value?
It's based on your property value. So again, it's.
You pay more if it's you're worth more?
Yes, so
Okay.
it's similar to your citywide and your police service tax
Okay.
levy.
The slide said 2024 operating budget and then 2024 capital program. I'm just wondering what the difference is in the words.
Still part of the capital budget, or sorry, operating budget is again the day-to-day operations, whereas the capital are investments that are benefit.
I understand the difference between operational and capital,
Yep.
but why is one budget and one's a program?
It's just I'll say similar thing. Still,
Okay.
it's still the budget, but you're speaking to the programs that we
Okay.
have within capital.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess one of my questions is for now is, with tonight happening, is there still time to influence the budget, or are we pretty much at a done deal?
No, there's absolutely still time to provide your feedback on the budget. Svetlana had mentioned about the ways to publicly engage. So you can always reach out to your counselor to provide that. We also have an online platform called Engage Ottawa, into which you can also provide feedback and questions there as well. And I'll say those are the main ones there. You'd all main two avenues there that you can always provide feedback. There's also opportunities at the remaining committee and board meetings that are occurring on Monday onwards, so the December 6th. Public delegations are invited to speak at those as well to provide feedback on the draft budget.
And I'm just wondering, I know there was a proposal about adding to the levy a certain amount or whatnot. Is that now a dead situation, or is that still being considered?
So the budget is built on based the direction it received during the budget directions, in which we were directed to build a draft budget based on a 2.5% increase. If there were going to be changes to that, that would be possibly brought up at the remaining committee meetings, and then when budget is being deliberated as a committee as a whole by council on December 6th. There can be panelists can bring forward suggestions there to have it, and then to which they would vote on.
I have one more question.
Sure.
Okay. My question about the 24 or 27 million for the housing?
Housing is a 23.8 million investment in housing in 2024.
Okay, and my question for that is that just for Ottawa building its own housing, or is that for Ottawa supporting other affordable housing projects, hopefully with provincial and federal funding to support?
Yes, we would be looking at our funding partners from the province and the federal government for housing into that, for investments into that. But the 24 is, I'll say the city's investment. I have to look. I don't quote me that. I think I have to just double check if we do have federal funding in part of that that figure.
And then just in regards to that, one of my biggest concerns about the housing, we keep on upping the price, well, or the budget amount, but really the cost of doing any of that work is basically being affected by the supply and demand situation. So it's very hard to get labor, and it's very hard to get materials or things done. All the supplies. Does the city have a strategy to be able to be competitive to get that labor required for those types of projects, or is it pretty much like a free for all and good luck?
I'll probably have to get back to details with you on that, but we face the same challenges as I'll say the rest of the industry or construction industry does. We did in the 2024 draft budget, I'll say a budget for inflationary pressures on that. But I'll probably have to just circle back and provide specific details on that if through your counselor's office.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
So seeing no further, are there any further additional questions? Anyone who wishes to ask a question in person or
Just
audio?
wanted to do another build up on that last one. My understanding is the money that the city has for housing, some of that goes into rent supplements, not always into building housing. Is that a part of that, or is that separate now? Is it all for building things where like you've got shelters and you've got housing and you've got subsidies that go to people to rent elsewhere, et cetera? Is it all in that one umbrella?
I would have to get the details, but I'm presuming that we probably have additional funds available through our operating budgets, but can you get those
Yeah, it's
details?
not, I'm not talking about operating budgets. I'm talking about direct subsidies. The
I'll-
city has a program. If you rent something and you can't afford it, they give you a subsidy to support that. I wonder if it's in that money too.
I'll circle back and get those details. My apologies for not having that today.
In regards to the social services budget that you have, is that based purely on inflation costs, or are you actually working to try to enhance the social services? I know I was at a meeting last night and there was comments about how the mental health issues that are happening in the city, both youth and also over 25, are progressing quite badly, especially with lower income homes. And yet they're losing funding, or they're not able to hire as much with the amount of money that they have. And so therefore they're having a huger need, but they're not actually getting enough resources to support that need, which will lead then to more expensive issues for all levels of government. So I'm just wondering, how did they come to that conclusion for that amount?
So for
Basically this social and community services.
oh, sorry. So sorry, I'm just gonna gather my thoughts here.
That's okay. I'm sorry that they're very targeted questions.
Yeah, and I think what I will do, just so I don't misquote anything, I think I would want to just go back and get those details, those proper details for you, and then again, circulate that information through.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Great. Lucas online has an additional question. Lucas, I'm prompting you to unmute here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I was wondering, I apologize because I came late for this presentation, but how is the City of Ottawa with this 2024 budget planning to increase the fleet a little bit, the fleet of the electric buses, OC Transpo? Is that the plan for at least some buses? Not like, I know it's a big chunk, a lot of big expenses, but I guess just wondering if there's any money allocated for the purchasing any electric buses with this next year's budget for the electric buses. So if I can get an answer for that, please.
Yes, there is a dedicated funding for the electrification of our buses. That figure is escaping my mind right now, and I know it's on the tip of my tongue. So if it comes to me before we close this meeting, I will let you know what that figure is. But yes, there is a dedicated line detail for the electric buses.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. There are no questions in the chat or virtual attendee questions. Anyone in person who wishes to ask anything? Otherwise, I will turn to Councillor Curry to close it off for tonight.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Andrew, for doing all that, for doing the logistics and the setup and managing it all online. Thank you very much, staff, for all of your hours and work on the budget, not just tonight at these presentations, but the many, many months you've been working on it. We really appreciate giving everyone the opportunity to ask the questions. I will say to everyone online, if you have other questions, you know how to reach us, Kathy.curry@ottawa.ca and Alan.Hubley@ottawa.ca. Happy to take questions. As you can tell, some of your questions are complex, and if you send an email, much easier to get fulsome answers for sure. But you've had the presentation of the budget tonight. This is what it looks like. To an earlier question, there's lots of time still to give input. You will see as the process goes, as Marianne knows and Karen knows, during budget debates, councillors put forward motions and change things slightly. So there's a lot of time to make changes and to give your feedback. So please take the time to do that and send us emails, because things that are written are the best for us to actually contemplate what you might be thinking. But thank you for coming out tonight. And, I'm glad we had a good enough night, and I believe there's coffee and other things there. So please, drink it up so we don't have it go in the garbage. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, again.